The ancient vault had remained sealed for 3,000 years beneath the crystalline towers of Xerion Prime. When the archaeological team finally broke through the quantum-locked barriers, they discovered something that would change the galaxy forever. The chamber stretched endlessly into darkness, filled with relics from a civilization that had vanished before most species had even developed spaceflight. Dr. Zelthrax, a renowned Corvani archaeologist, led the expedition with trembling appendages. His species had dedicated their lives to uncovering the mysteries of the predecessors, an ancient race that had supposedly created wonders beyond current understanding. The chamber contained countless artifacts, but one item drew every eye like a magnet. In the center of the vault, suspended in a column of soft blue light, hung a suit of armor unlike anything they had ever seen. It appeared to be made from a material that shifted between metallic silver and deep black, depending on the viewing angle. Strange symbols pulsed along its surface in rhythmic patterns, and an energy field surrounded it that made their instruments go haywire. "Magnificent," whispered Dr. Vexthera, a Zalonian expert in ancient technologies. Her four eyes examined the armor from every angle as her team's scanners worked frantically to analyze its composition. "The energy readings are off the charts. This isn't just armor, it's some kind of technological marvel." The armor stood roughly 2 meters tall, designed for a bipedal species with 2 arms and legs. It had a sleek, almost organic appearance that suggested it might adapt to its wearer. The helmet was the most striking feature, with a smooth faceplate that seemed to contain swirling galaxies of light when viewed directly. Captain Thyros of the Galactic Coalition Defense Force studied the armor with military precision. His draconian heritage made him naturally suspicious of unknown weapons, and this clearly fell into that category. "We need to understand what this thing does before anyone gets near it," he rumbled, his scaled hide reflecting the armor's strange glow. The research team spent weeks in the vault, running every test imaginable. They discovered that the armor's material was completely unknown to galactic science. It seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. Energy weapons passed right through it, while physical projectiles bounced off harmlessly. Most disturbing of all, it appeared to be alive in some sense, responding to their presence with subtle changes in its light patterns. Dr. Zelthrax became obsessed with unlocking the armor's secrets. His normally methodical approach gave way to increasingly desperate attempts to understand its purpose. "The predecessors didn't create this as mere protection," he told his team during one of many late-night research sessions. "The energy patterns suggest it's designed to enhance the wearer's natural abilities, possibly to an extraordinary degree." After a month of study, they made their first breakthrough. Dr. Vexithera discovered that the armor was actively scanning every being that approached it. Her instruments detected complex energy patterns emanating from the suit whenever someone came within 10 meters. It was analyzing them, judging them by criteria that remained completely mysterious. "It's looking for something specific," she reported to the Coalition Command. "Every time one of us approaches, it runs what appears to be a compatibility check. But so far, it's rejected every attempt at contact." The news spread quickly through galactic scientific communities. Representatives from dozens of species requested permission to visit the vault and attempt to interface with the armor. The Coalition, recognizing the potential importance of the discovery, agreed to allow limited testing under strict supervision. The first volunteer was Commander Xylos, a veteran warrior from the proud Zentaurian military caste. His species had conquered half their home galaxy through superior combat prowess and advanced technology. If anyone could be worthy of ancient battle armor, surely it would be a Zentaurian champion. Commander Xylos approached the armor with confidence, his natural warrior instincts telling him this was meant for someone like him. As he drew closer, the armor's light patterns intensified, and the scanning energy washed over him in visible waves. For a moment, hope filled the chamber as the armor seemed to respond more strongly than ever before. Then the rejection came. The armor's light shifted to an angry red, and an invisible force pushed Xylos backward with enough strength to send the 2-meter-tall warrior sliding across the floor. The message was clear: not worthy. Next came High Mystic Avalon, a member of the transcendent ethereal race. These beings existed partially in normal space and partially in higher dimensions, making them the most advanced psychic species known to the galaxy. Surely if the armor required some form of mental or spiritual connection, an ethereal could provide it. Avalon floated toward the armor in meditation pose, her translucent form glowing with inner light. The armor's scanning intensified to levels that made nearby instruments shut down to prevent damage. The chamber filled with harmonic resonance as two ancient technologies seemed to communicate. For several minutes, Avalon maintained her position near the armor, while energy patterns danced between them. The rejection, when it came, was even more violent than before. The armor's defense field expanded suddenly, creating a shockwave that knocked everyone in the chamber to their knees. Avalon herself was thrown backward with such force that she nearly lost cohesion, her ethereal form flickering dangerously before stabilizing. Species after species attempted to claim the armor. The massive, nearly indestructible Goliaths were rejected. The technologically superior synthetics who had merged organic and artificial intelligence were deemed unworthy. Even the ancient Voidwalkers, who claimed to be older than most known civilizations, could not pass the armor's mysterious tests. Each rejection seemed to make the armor more aggressive in its responses. What had started as gentle pushes escalated to violent repulsions that left would-be wearers injured and humiliated. The armor appeared to be growing impatient, its light patterns becoming more erratic and intense with each failed attempt. Dr. Zelthrax began to suspect that they were missing something fundamental about the armor's requirements. Perhaps it's not looking for physical strength or advanced evolution, he theorized. Maybe there's something more basic, more essential that it requires from a potential wearer. The galaxy watched with growing fascination as news of the rejections spread. Some began to whisper that perhaps no living being was worthy of the predecessor's creation. Others suggested that the armor might be broken, damaged by millennia of isolation. None of them suspected that somewhere in the Outer Rim territories, on a small blue planet that most of the galaxy considered barely civilized, the one being the armor was waiting for was about to receive a message that would change everything. Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Exploration Corps received the transmission while conducting a routine survey of the Kepler 442 system. Her small research vessel, the Horizon's Edge, was one of humanity's newest deep space exploration ships, equipped with experimental quantum communication arrays that could maintain contact across vast distances. "Captain, you're getting a priority message from Coalition Command," announced her communications officer, Lieutenant Martinez. "It's tagged as urgent scientific consultation." Sarah frowned as she reviewed the transmission. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Coalition for 15 years, ever since first contact with the Zilonian survey fleet had revealed that Earth was far from alone in the universe. Despite their rapid technological advancement and eager participation in galactic affairs, humans were still considered newcomers by most species. The message was unlike anything she had ever received. Dr. Zelthrax himself was requesting human participation in what he described as the most significant archaeological discovery in galactic history. The details were sparse, but the implications were staggering. An artifact that had rejected representatives from dozens of advanced species was waiting for someone worthy enough to claim it. "Ma'am, should I plot a course for Zerion Prime?" asked her navigator, Ensign Park. The young officer could barely contain his excitement at the prospect of participating in such a momentous discovery. Sarah studied the star charts, calculating the journey time. It would take them 3 weeks even with their fastest hyperspace jumps. "Do it," she decided, and send a reply to Dr. Zelthrax. Tell him the Terran representative is en route. What she didn't mention in her reply was that she had no idea why the Coalition thought a human might succeed where so many others had failed. Humanity was still learning its place in the galactic community. They were neither the strongest, nor the smartest, nor the most technologically advanced species in known space. In fact, most aliens viewed humans as an interesting but unremarkable species that had achieved space travel through determination rather than natural superiority. During the 3-week journey to Zerion Prime, Sarah researched everything available about the predecessors and the discovered vault. The more she learned, the more puzzled she became. The predecessors had supposedly been a godlike race that had vanished before most current civilizations had even begun. Their technology was so advanced that even their simplest artifacts were beyond current understanding. "Why do you think they asked for us?" Lieutenant Martinez wondered during one of their briefing sessions. "I mean, we've been in space for what, barely 2 centuries? These other species have been exploring the galaxy for millennia." Sarah had been wondering the same thing. Maybe that's exactly why, she said slowly. Maybe being the newest, the least experienced, gives us some kind of advantage. When the horizon's edge finally dropped out of hyperspace near Xerion Prime, Sarah was amazed by what she saw. The planet was covered in massive crystalline structures that reached into space itself. Orbital platforms surrounded the world like a technological ring system, and ships from dozens of species filled the local space lanes. The archaeological site had become the center of galactic attention. Representatives from major powers had arrived to witness what many believed would be a historic moment. The news feeds were calling it the Trial of Worth, and betting pools had opened across the galaxy on whether any species would prove worthy of the ancient armor. Dr. Zelthrax met Sarah's shuttle personally when it docked with the main research station. The Corvani scientist was clearly exhausted, his normally pristine appearance showing signs of weeks of stress and sleepless nights. "Captain Chen," he said, extending one of his 4 arms in the human gesture of greeting he had learned. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I must admit I'm not entirely certain why I requested human participation, but something about your species intrigues me." Sarah followed him through corridors filled with alien scientists and military officials. Many stopped to stare at her, clearly curious about what the newest species might offer to this ancient puzzle. She tried to ignore their attention and focus on Dr. Zelthrax's briefing. "The armor has become increasingly agitated," he explained as they walked. "Each rejection seems to make it more unstable. Some of my colleagues believe it may be building toward some kind of catastrophic release of energy if it doesn't find a suitable wearer soon." They entered an observation deck overlooking the vault chamber. Through reinforced transparent barriers, Sarah could see the armor floating in its column of light. Even from this distance, she could feel something from it, a strange resonance that seemed to vibrate in her bones. "Incredible," she whispered. The armor was beautiful and terrible at the same time, clearly containing power beyond imagination. As she watched, the light patterns on its surface shifted and changed, creating an almost hypnotic display. "Would you like to see the testing chamber?" Dr. Zelthrax asked. "We've recorded every attempt so far. Perhaps studying the rejections will give you insight into what the armor seeks." For the next several hours, Sarah watched recordings of failed attempts by representatives from dozens of species. Each rejection was unique, as if the armor tailored its response to the specific nature of the applicant. Warriors were met with force. Psychics encountered mental barriers. Technologically enhanced beings faced system failures. It's not just rejecting them, Sarah realized as she studied the patterns. It's testing them. Each response tells us something about what it's looking for. Dr. Vexthara, who had joined them for the briefing, nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly what we suspect. The question is, what qualities is it testing for? Physical strength? Mental capability? Spiritual development? Technological integration?" Sarah continued studying the recordings, but her attention kept drifting back to the armor itself. Through the observation windows, she could see it floating in its chamber, and she had the strangest feeling that it was aware of her presence. The light patterns seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, though she told herself that was probably her imagination. "Captain Chen," Dr. Zelthrax said carefully, "I should mention that the risks involved in testing are considerable. Several volunteers have been injured, and we can't guarantee your safety if you choose to attempt contact with the armor." Sarah nodded without taking her eyes off the artifact. "I understand the risks, Doctor, but I didn't travel 3 weeks across the galaxy just to watch from the sidelines." That night, as she prepared for her attempt the following day, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. She stood at the observation window, watching the armor pulse with its mysterious light. Other observers had left for the evening, leaving her alone with the ancient artifact. As she stood there, something extraordinary happened. The armor's light patterns suddenly synchronized, creating a steady rhythmic pulse that seemed to call to something deep inside her. For just a moment she felt a connection, a sense of recognition that defied explanation. "Tomorrow," she whispered to herself, pressing her hand against the observation window. "Tomorrow we'll see what you're really looking for." What Sarah didn't know was that far below in the vault, the armor had stopped its restless scanning for the first time in weeks. Its sensors had finally detected what it had been programmed to find 3,000 years ago. The wait was almost over. The testing chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy as Sarah prepared for her attempt. Word had spread that a human was going to try where so many others had failed, and the betting odds had shifted dramatically. Most galactic observers gave her less than a 5% chance of success, though a few outlying bookmakers were offering surprisingly favorable odds on the unknown human factor. Sarah stood in the preparation chamber, adjusting the bio-monitoring equipment that would track her vital signs during the encounter. Dr. Zelthrax and his team had insisted on maximum safety protocols, including emergency medical teams from 3 different species standing by in case something went wrong. "Captain, your neural activity is showing some unusual patterns," reported Dr. Vexthera, studying the readouts from her scanning equipment. "It's almost as if your brain is already resonating with the armor's energy field, even from this distance." Sarah felt the strange sensation too. Ever since entering the facility, she had been aware of a subtle vibration in her mind, like a distant song that she could almost but not quite hear. It was growing stronger as she approached the testing chamber. "Is that normal?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Not at all," Dr. Zelthrax replied, his 4 eyes focused intently on the readings. "No previous volunteer has shown any measurable interaction with the armor until they were within 10 meters of it. You're still 50 meters away." Captain Thyros, who had been observing silently from the corner, stepped forward. "Perhaps we should reconsider this test," he rumbled, his draconian instincts clearly warning him of danger. "The armor's energy output has increased by 30% since the human arrived. If something goes wrong, something will go wrong if we don't try," Sarah interrupted firmly. "Dr. Zelthrax, your own readings show the armor is becoming unstable. How long before it becomes dangerous to everyone on this station?" The Corvani scientist hesitated before answering. "Our best estimates suggest we have perhaps a week before the energy buildup reaches critical levels. After that," he spread his forearms in a gesture of uncertainty. Sarah nodded and moved toward the chamber entrance. "Then we don't have time for second-guessing. Let's see what this thing wants." The massive doors to the testing chamber slid open with a deep, resonant hum. Sarah stepped through into a space that seemed far larger than it should have been, given the station's dimensions. The armor waited in the center, suspended in its column of blue light, and she could immediately feel its attention focus on her with laser-like intensity. She began walking forward slowly, following the same approach path that dozens of other volunteers had taken. At 50 meters, the armor's scanning beams activated, washing over her in waves of energy that made her skin tingle. The sensation was unlike anything the other volunteers had described, warm and almost welcoming rather than intrusive. "Remarkable." Dr. Vexthera's voice came through the communication system. "The armor's scanning pattern is completely different. It's not probing for weaknesses or testing defenses. It's almost like it's greeting you." At 30 meters, something unprecedented happened. The armor's light pattern suddenly shifted to match Sarah's heartbeat and brainwave patterns, creating a synchronized display that was visible to everyone in the observation deck. Gasps of amazement echoed through the communication system as representatives from dozens of species realized they were witnessing something entirely new. Sarah felt the connection strengthen as she continued forward. The strange song in her mind became clearer, resolving into something that wasn't quite music but conveyed meaning nonetheless. She began to understand that the armor wasn't just a piece of equipment. It was a test, a filter designed to find a very specific type of being. At 20 meters, the armor began to descend from its suspension column. Sarah stopped walking, unsure if this was a good sign or a warning. The ancient artifact touched the ground for the first time in 3,000 years, and the entire chamber seemed to vibrate with harmonic resonance. "Captain Chen, are you all right?" Dr. Zelthrax's voice carried obvious concern. "Your vital signs are stable, but the energy readings are off our charts." "I'm fine," Sarah replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. The connection with the armor was becoming stronger with each passing moment, and she was beginning to understand things that should have been impossible for her to know. I think I understand what it's looking for." She took another step forward, then another. At 15 meters, the armor's faceplate suddenly became transparent, revealing an interior that seemed to contain swirling galaxies of light. At 10 meters, the energy field around the armor expanded to envelop her, and she felt a moment of vertigo as if she were falling through space. "What is it looking for?" Dr. Zelthrax asked urgently. Sarah paused, trying to put the understanding that was flowing into her mind into words that others could comprehend. Not strength, she said finally. Not intelligence or technology or psychic power. It's looking for something much more basic than that. What then? Multiple voices asked simultaneously through the communication system. Potential, Sarah whispered, taking another step forward. Unlimited, undeveloped potential. Every species that tried before, they've already reached their peak, already defined what they are and what they can become. The armor isn't looking for perfection. It's looking for a species that hasn't finished growing yet. The implications of her words sent shockwaves through the observation deck. Humanity was indeed the youngest species in the galactic community, still rapidly evolving and adapting. While others had achieved stability and reached the limits of their natural development, humans were still changing, still reaching for something beyond their current capabilities. At 5 meters, the armor stepped forward to meet her. Sarah felt no fear, only a sense of rightness, as if this moment had been inevitable from the instant humans first looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. The armor's energy field intensified, but instead of rejection, she felt acceptance, recognition, welcome. The predecessors, she said suddenly, understanding flooding through her mind. They weren't gods. They were just like us, young, growing, reaching for something beyond themselves. This armor, it's their gift to whoever comes next. Dr. Zelthrax's voice was barely a whisper. Captain, the armor is opening. Sarah looked down to see the armor's chest plate sliding apart with mechanical precision that defied its organic appearance. Interior components shifted and reconfigured themselves, clearly adapting to her specific biological requirements. The invitation was unmistakable. Sarah, don't. Lieutenant Martinez's voice cut through the communication static. We don't know what it will do to you. But Sarah was already moving forward. The connection with the armor had become so strong that she could feel its purpose, its desperate need to fulfill the function for which it had been created. It had waited 3,000 years for someone like her, someone from a species still young enough to grow, still foolish enough to believe that anything was possible. She reached out and touched the armor's open chest plate. The metal was warm under her fingers, and she could feel it pulse with lifelike energy. In that moment, she understood that putting on the armor wouldn't just protect her, it would change her, transform her into something new, something that bridged the gap between what humanity was and what it could become. The choice was hers, and the galaxy held its breath waiting to see what the human would decide. Sarah stepped forward into the armor without hesitation. The moment her body made contact with the interior surfaces, everything changed. The armor flowed around her like liquid metal, adjusting itself to her exact dimensions and biological requirements. She felt no weight from it, no restriction of movement, only a sense of completion, as if she had been incomplete her entire life without knowing it. The transformation was immediate and overwhelming. Energy coursed through her body as the armor's systems integrated with her nervous system, her circulatory system, even her genetic structure. She could feel her perception expanding, her mind suddenly able to process information at impossible speeds. The chamber around her became crystal clear, every detail visible with perfect clarity. By the void, Captain Thyros whispered through the communication system. What have we done? Sarah looked down at herself and gasped. The armor hadn't simply covered her body, it had become part of her. The surface rippled and shifted like living metal, responding to her thoughts and emotions. When she flexed her fingers, she could see energy patterns dancing beneath the armor's surface, as if her very life force was now visible. Captain Chen, please respond. Dr. Zelthrax's voice carried barely controlled panic. Are you still you? Sarah opened her mouth to respond and was startled by the sound of her own voice. It carried harmonics that hadn't been there before, undertones that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. I'm still me, she said, though even as she spoke the words, she wasn't entirely certain they were true. But I'm also more than I was. The armor's helmet materialized around her head, and suddenly she could see everything. Not just the testing chamber, but through the walls, through the station itself, out into space beyond. Her perception expanded to encompass the entire Xerion system, and she could sense every ship, every life form, every energy signature within millions of kilometers. The energy readings are impossible, Dr. Vexisthara reported, her voice filled with scientific excitement and terror in equal measure. She's generating power levels equivalent to a small star. How is the station even containing this? Sarah understood the answer intuitively. The armor wasn't just drawing power from her. It was drawing energy from the quantum vacuum itself, from the fundamental forces that held the universe together. She had become a conduit for forces that most civilizations couldn't even detect, let alone harness. She took a step forward, and the simple movement sent ripples through local space-time. Gravity fluctuated around her, and for a moment, everyone in the observation deck felt themselves become lighter, as if the station's artificial gravity had been temporarily overwhelmed. "This is incredible," Sarah breathed, watching as her hand passed through what should have been solid matter. "I can phase between dimensions. I can manipulate fundamental forces. This isn't just armor. It's a gateway to capabilities that most species can't even imagine." The implications began to dawn on the observers. Humanity, already known for their adaptability and rapid technological advancement, had just gained access to technology that put them centuries ahead of every other known civilization. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in a single moment. "Captain Chen," came a new voice through the communication system. "Admiral Vortex of the Coalition Defense Force. I need you to listen very carefully. What you're experiencing may feel wonderful, but you need to understand the position this puts us all in. There are species out there that will see this as a threat to their very existence." Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure if the gesture was visible through the armor's energy field. She was becoming aware of the broader implications of what had just happened. Through the armor's enhanced perception, she could sense the reactions of the various species representatives throughout the station. Fear, awe, calculation, and in some cases barely contained hostility. "I can feel their thoughts," she said suddenly, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Not their specific thoughts, but their emotional states, their intentions. "Admiral, some of the observers are already planning how to contain or eliminate this threat." The communication channel erupted in multiple languages as representatives from various species began arguing about the implications of a human gaining access to predecessor technology. Sarah could understand every word, even languages she had never heard before, as if the armor was translating everything in real time. Dr. Zelthrax's voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone please remain calm. Captain Chen, can you remove the armor?" Sarah considered the question, probing the interface between herself and the ancient technology. "I don't think it works that way," she replied slowly. "It's not something I'm wearing anymore. It's become part of me at a cellular level. I can suppress its visible appearance, but the integration is permanent." As if to demonstrate, she willed the armor to become invisible. To the observers, it appeared as if she was suddenly standing naked in the chamber, though she could still feel the armor's presence and power flowing through her. A thought brought it back into visibility, the metal flowing across her skin like liquid starlight. "This is exactly what the predecessors intended," she continued, understanding flooding through her consciousness. They knew that whoever found this armor would need to be able to grow with it, to evolve alongside it. A species that had already reached their evolutionary peak wouldn't be able to handle the transformation. Through the armor's enhanced senses, she became aware of something troubling. Energy signatures were building up throughout the station, as various species' security forces prepared for possible conflict. She could sense weapons being charged, shields being raised, and worst of all, at least 3 different groups were preparing to call for military reinforcements. "Admiral," she said urgently, "we have a problem. Multiple factions are treating this as a hostile situation. I can sense weapons being prepared throughout the station." Admiral Vortex's response was immediate. "All coalition forces stand down." Repeat, "all coalition forces stand down. No hostile actions are to be taken without direct authorization from coalition command." But Sarah could sense that not all the armed groups on the station were under coalition authority. Several species had brought their own security forces, and some of them were clearly operating under orders to secure the armor by any means necessary. "They're going to try to take it," she realized, the armor's predictive system showing her probability cascades of the next few minutes. "Multiple assault teams are moving into position. They think they can overwhelm me while I'm still adapting to the armor's systems." Dr. Zelthrax's voice carried desperation. "Captain, you need to understand, this situation is rapidly spiraling out of control. The discovery of functional predecessor technology has implications that go far beyond archaeology. There are species that will go to war to prevent any one faction from gaining this kind of advantage." Sarah felt the armor's defensive systems beginning to activate in response to the approaching threats. Energy began building in weapon systems she hadn't even known existed moments before. The armor was preparing to defend itself and her, and she had the terrifying realization that it was capable of devastating the entire station if necessary. "I won't let this become a massacre," she said firmly, making a decision that would echo across the galaxy. "But I also won't let anyone take this technology by force. If they want to understand what humanity has become, they're going to have to learn to ask nicely." The first assault team breached the chamber doors just as Sarah finished speaking, and the galaxy was about to discover exactly what happened when someone threatened a human who had just gained access to godlike power. The Zalarian assault team burst through the chamber doors with military precision, their plasma weapons already charged and targeting Sarah's position. These elite soldiers had been sent by the Zalarian Empire with specific orders to secure the armor at any cost, viewing humanity's access to predecessor technology as an unacceptable threat to galactic stability. Sarah felt the armor's defensive systems activate before her conscious mind even registered the threat. Time seemed to slow as her enhanced perception analyzed the attacker's weapons, trajectory, and intentions in microseconds. She could see the plasma bolts leaving their weapons, could calculate their exact paths, and, most remarkably, could formulate 17 different ways to neutralize the threat without permanent harm. Instead of violence, she chose something far more unsettling. Sarah simply stepped sideways into a dimensional space that existed between normal reality and the quantum foam. The plasma bolts passed harmlessly through the space where she had been standing, striking the far wall with brilliant flashes of superheated energy. To the assault team, she had simply vanished. "Target has disappeared," the team leader reported through his communication system. "Repeat, target has vanished from sensors." Sarah reappeared directly behind the squad, having moved through dimensional space in a way that defied conventional physics. The armor's stealth capabilities allowed her to manifest silently, and she placed a hand on each soldier's shoulder before they even realized she was there. "Gentlemen," she said calmly, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in their bones, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." The Zalarian soldiers spun around, weapons raised, but found themselves unable to fire. The armor had released a localized field that disrupted their weapons' targeting systems while simultaneously generating a neural dampening effect that made aggressive action feel suddenly unappealing. "How did you—" the team leader began, then stopped as he realized his weapon was completely non-functional. "Your weapons are temporarily disabled," Sarah explained patiently. "And before you think about calling for backup, you should know that I can sense at least 4 more assault teams converging on this position. Croshan fighters from the outer corridor, Draconian Marines from the upper deck, synthetic infiltration units from the ventilation system, and what appears to be a Zentorian death squad that just breached the station's outer hull." Dr. Zelthrax's voice cut through the communication chaos. "Captain Chen, the situation is escalating beyond our control. Coalition Command is receiving threat warnings from half the major powers in the galaxy. Some are demanding immediate access to the armor. Others are calling for its destruction." Through the armor's enhanced awareness, Sarah could feel the building tension throughout the station. What had started as a scientific expedition was rapidly becoming the flashpoint for a galactic conflict. She realized that her next actions would determine whether this technology became a tool for peace or the catalyst for the largest war in galactic history. "Dr. Zelthrax," she said, maintaining perfect calm despite the chaos around her, "I need you to establish a direct communication link with Coalition Command, and then patch in representatives from every major power. It's time for humanity to have a conversation with the galaxy." The Zalarian team leader, still unable to fire his weapon but not willing to give up, reached for a backup plasma grenade. Sarah sighed and gestured casually in his direction. The soldier suddenly found himself floating 3 meters off the ground, held gently but immovably by gravitational fields that the armor generated as easily as breathing. "Really?" she asked, looking up at the suspended soldier. "After I demonstrated that your weapons don't work, you thought an explosive device was a good idea? In an enclosed space station, with thousands of people aboard?" The soldier's face went pale as he realized the implications of what he had been about to do. Sarah lowered him gently to the ground and disabled his remaining weapons with another casual gesture. "Captain Chen," Admiral Vortex's voice carried barely controlled urgency, "we have a massive problem. Long-range sensors are detecting military fleets from 6 different empires moving toward this system. Estimated arrival times range from 6 hours to 3 days. The Zalarian Empire has declared the armor a threat to galactic security and is demanding its immediate surrender. The Croshan hegemony is claiming salvage rights based on some ancient treaty. The Draconian clans are mobilizing their entire war fleet. Sarah closed her eyes and extended her awareness through the armor's sensors. She could indeed detect the approaching fleets, massive concentrations of military power converging on Zerion Prime. The armor's predictive systems were already running probability calculations, and the results were sobering. Without intervention, the conflict that was building would likely result in the deaths of billions and could potentially destabilize the entire galactic civilization. There's something else. Dr. Vexithara's voice carried a note of scientific excitement mixed with terror. The armor's energy output is continuing to increase. It's not just responding to your biometrics anymore. It's actively evolving, becoming more powerful as it integrates with your neural patterns. At current rates of expansion, within 72 hours, you'll be generating enough energy to affect stellar mechanics. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The armor wasn't just making her powerful. It was making her into something beyond current understanding of physics. She was becoming a force of nature, a living weapon capable of reshaping reality itself. This is why they rejected everyone else, she realized suddenly. Not because they weren't worthy, but because they couldn't handle this level of transformation. Their species had evolved to fixed parameters. They couldn't grow beyond what they already were. Through the communication system, she could hear representatives from dozens of species arguing, threatening, and demanding. The galaxy was tearing itself apart over technology they didn't understand, wielded by a species they had previously dismissed as insignificant newcomers. Enough, Sarah said quietly, but her voice somehow carried through every communication channel on the station and beyond. The armor was amplifying her words, broadcasting them across the entire Zerion system and to the approaching fleets. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Exploration Corps, currently in possession of what you're calling predecessor armor. I have a message for every government, every military commander, and every politician who thinks they can take this technology by force. She paused, feeling the weight of galactic attention focused on her words. You can't have it. Not because I won't give it to you, but because it would destroy you. This armor doesn't just require physical compatibility. It requires evolutionary flexibility that your species lost millennia ago. If any of you put this on, it would tear you apart at the cellular level. The communication channels erupted in disbelief and accusations, but Sarah continued. However, I'm willing to discuss sharing what I learned from it. But that conversation happens on humanity's terms, with proper diplomatic protocols, not at gunpoint. Any fleet that approaches this system with hostile intent will be turned away. Any assault team that tries to take this armor by force will be stopped. I'm not threatening you, I'm simply explaining reality. Admiral Vortex's voice cut through the chaos. Captain, you're essentially declaring war on half the galaxy. No, Sarah replied, feeling the armor's power flowing through her like liquid starlight. I'm preventing one. Trust me, Admiral, in about 60 seconds, everyone involved is going to understand exactly why that's a good thing. The armor's sensors detected the next wave of assault teams approaching the chamber, and Sarah prepared to demonstrate just how much the galaxy had underestimated humanity's potential for growth. The demonstration began when 3 separate assault teams breached the chamber simultaneously. Croshan berserkers burst through the main entrance, their massive forms bristling with heavy assault weapons. Synthetic infiltrators phased through the walls using advanced cloaking technology, while Zentarian commandos rappelled down from ventilation shafts above. It was a coordinated attack designed to overwhelm any possible defense. Sarah stood calmly in the center of the chamber and did something that redefined the observer's understanding of what was possible. She multiplied herself, not illusions or holograms, but actual dimensional duplicates, each one real and solid and possessing the full power of the armor. The Croshan berserkers found themselves facing 3 versions of Sarah, each moving with impossible grace and speed. The synthetic infiltrators discovered that their advanced technology was useless against beings who could manipulate reality at the quantum level. The Zentarian commandos, dropping from above, found themselves caught in gravitational fields that gently lowered them to the ground, while simultaneously disabling their equipment. "This is impossible," the Croshan team leader growled, his species' natural aggression warring with the evidence of his own sensors. "Our weapons should be tearing through anything biological." "You're thinking too conventionally," one of the Sarah duplicates replied, casually walking through a barrage of plasma fire as if it were gentle rain. "The armor doesn't just protect me from your weapons, it makes your weapons irrelevant. I exist partially outside normal space-time now. Your energy weapons are firing at where I was, not where I am." The synthetic infiltrators tried a different approach, attempting to hack the armor's systems directly through quantum data streams. They were met with feedback that sent them reeling, their artificial minds struggling to process information that operated on principles beyond their programming. "Fascinating," the lead synthetic reported, its voice carrying electronic harmonics of confusion. "The armor's systems don't operate on any known computational framework. It's as if it processes information using the fundamental structures of reality itself." Sarah merged her duplicates back into a single form and gestured toward the disabled assault teams. "Gentlemen, you've just learned what everyone in the galaxy is about to discover. This technology doesn't just make me more powerful, it makes me more than what your current understanding of physics says is possible." Dr. Zelthrax's voice cut through the communication channels, filled with scientific awe. "Captain Chen, the energy readings we're detecting suggest you're not just using the armor, you're evolving with it. Your cellular structure is changing in real time, adapting to handle increasingly complex dimensional manipulations." Through the armor's enhanced perception, Sarah could sense the approaching fleets more clearly now. The Zalarian Empire had deployed their finest dreadnoughts, ships capable of glassing entire planets. The Croshan hegemony was bringing their infamous world killers, vessels designed for total warfare. Most disturbing of all, the ancient Voidwalker Collective had emerged from their home dimension for the first time in centuries, their reality-bending ships moving through spaces that normal sensors couldn't even detect. "Admiral Vortex," Sarah said, her voice carrying across all communication channels simultaneously, "I need you to relay a message to the approaching fleets. Tell them they have 30 minutes to reverse course and withdraw to minimum safe distance. After that, I'll be demonstrating exactly why threatening a human with predecessor technology is a very poor decision." The response was immediate and predictable. Every fleet commander began demanding immediate surrender of the armor, threatening consequences that ranged from planetary bombardment to total species extinction. Sarah listened to their threats with the patience of someone who had suddenly gained access to power that made such threats meaningless. "Dr. Zelthrax," she said calmly, "what's the current energy output reading?" "Approximately 1023 watts and climbing exponentially," the scientist replied, his voice barely steady. "Captain, that's approaching the energy output of a medium-sized star. How are you containing that kind of power?" "I'm not containing it," Sarah replied, understanding flooding through her consciousness as the armor's full capabilities became clear. "I'm channeling it. The armor doesn't generate power. It accesses the infinite energy of the quantum vacuum and focuses it through biological interfaces. The predecessors built it to be used by beings who could grow and adapt, rather than beings who had already reached their evolutionary limits." The implications hit everyone listening simultaneously. Humanity wasn't just wearing advanced technology. They had become a conduit for forces that could reshape reality itself. Sarah could feel herself continuing to evolve, her consciousness expanding to encompass concepts that had no names in any known language. 25 minutes remaining," she announced, and this time her voice carried harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal hearing. Every being within 1,000 kilometers felt it in their bones, a reminder that something fundamental had changed in the balance of galactic power. The Zalarian fleet commander was the first to break. "This is Admiral Thexmore of the Zalarian Dreadnought Dominion. Human, you will surrender the armor immediately or face the consequences. We have enough firepower to crack this planet's crust." Sarah's response was to appear simultaneously on every ship in the approaching fleets, not as a hologram or transmission, but physically present on hundreds of vessels at once. The armor had made her existence fluid enough to be in multiple locations throughout the star system simultaneously. "Admiral Thexmore," she said, standing in the center of his command bridge while identical versions of herself appeared on every other ship. "I appreciate your position, but you're operating under some fundamental misunderstandings about the current situation." The Zalarian bridge crew tried to draw weapons, but found their equipment had become mysteriously non-functional. Sarah hadn't damaged anything. She had simply convinced the laws of physics in the local area that energy weapons were temporarily impossible. First, she continued, threatening to destroy a planet to get a weapon is generally considered poor military strategy. Second, you're assuming that your weapons can actually affect someone who exists partially outside normal space-time. Third, and most importantly, you're making the classic mistake of thinking that technology is about tools rather than understanding. She gestured, and suddenly every person on every ship in the approaching fleets could see through her eyes, experiencing for just a moment what it felt like to perceive reality, the way the armor allowed her to. The experience lasted only seconds, but it was enough to fundamentally change how they understood their place in the universe. 20 minutes remaining, Sarah announced, her voice now carrying across the entire star system without any technological assistance. Use that time wisely, gentlemen. Decide whether you want to be the civilizations that tried to steal fire from the gods, or the ones that learned to ask politely for lessons in making their own. The fleets held their positions, but Sarah could sense the heated discussions taking place among their command structures. Some were beginning to realize that they were facing something unprecedented in galactic history. Others were doubling down on military solutions to what was rapidly becoming a problem that couldn't be solved with conventional force. She smiled, feeling the armor systems preparing for what would either be the most important diplomatic moment in galactic history or the most spectacular demonstration of why threatening humanity had just become a species-ending mistake. When the 20-minute deadline expired, Sarah demonstrated exactly why the armor had waited 3,000 years for humanity. Instead of violence, she chose creation. With a thought that rippled across multiple dimensions, Sarah reached out through the quantum substrate of space-time and began to build. Energy flowed through her consciousness like liquid light, as she shaped matter and energy at the molecular level. In the space between Zerion Prime and its moon, something impossible began to take form. A city, not built on any surface but floating free in the vacuum of space, contained within atmospheric fields that the armor generated from pure energy. Crystalline spires that seemed to contain captured starlight rose from platforms that defied conventional physics. Gardens bloomed in perfect environmental bubbles, complete with trees and flowing water that somehow existed without any visible support structure. Behold, Sarah's voice resonated across every communication channel in the star system. What the predecessors intended. Not weapons of conquest, but tools of creation. This is why the armor rejected every species that tried to claim it. You were all looking for power to destroy, when it was designed to give power to build. The floating city continued to grow, expanding outward in impossible spirals of architecture that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. Ships from the approaching fleets found their weapons automatically, powering down as their crews became transfixed by the sight of matter being created from pure thought. Dr. Zelthrax's voice carried scientific wonder and terror in equal measure. Captain, the energy manipulations you're performing should be impossible. You're violating fundamental laws of thermodynamics, creating matter from vacuum energy, maintaining stable atmospheric pressure in open space without containment fields. How is any of this possible? Because the laws of physics aren't laws, Sarah replied, her consciousness now expanded enough to carry on dozens of conversations simultaneously while continuing to build her orbital city. They're more like suggestions, and the armor gives me the understanding to politely ask the universe to make exceptions. The Zalarian Admiral Thexmore was the first to break the stunned silence. Impossible. No single being can manipulate reality on this scale. What you're doing requires the combined industrial capacity of an entire stellar civilization. That's exactly the thinking that made your species unsuitable for the armor, Sarah explained patiently. You've become trapped by your own understanding of limitations. Humanity hasn't been spacefaring long enough to convince ourselves that anything is impossible. We're still young enough to grow. The city reached its final form, a magnificent structure that stretched for hundreds of kilometers through space, providing living space for millions while demonstrating technologies that were beyond the understanding of the assembled fleets. But Sarah wasn't finished. With another thought, she began duplicating her consciousness across quantum space, creating stable copies of her awareness that could exist independently, while remaining connected to the original. Suddenly, instead of one human with godlike power, There were dozens of them, each one capable of the same reality-manipulating feats. This is what the predecessors became, she explained, her multiple selves speaking in perfect harmony. Not a single overpowered individual, but a collective consciousness that could exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. They didn't disappear. They evolved beyond the need for fixed physical forms. The implications sent shockwaves through every government in the galaxy. Humanity hadn't just gained access to advanced technology. They had gained the ability to transcend the normal limitations of biological existence. One species with predecessor armor was concerning. Multiple humans with that capability was civilization-changing. Admiral Vortex's voice cut through the chaos. Captain Chen, you need to understand the position this puts the Coalition in. Every major power in the galaxy is going to demand access to this technology. If we refuse, we'll face the largest military alliance in galactic history. And if they attack us, Sarah replied, her multiple selves now beginning construction of additional cities throughout the star system. They'll discover that humanity has just graduated from being a minor species to being something entirely new. But I don't want war, Admiral. I want something much more productive. She gestured toward the assembled fleets, and suddenly, every ship's communication system activated simultaneously. Attention all fleet commanders. I'm transmitting detailed technical specifications for fusion reactor improvements, medical technologies that will extend lifespans by centuries, and agricultural techniques that will eliminate hunger on every world you control. This is freely given, with no strings attached. The data streams began flowing immediately, containing technologies that were decades ahead of anything currently available to galactic civilization. Sarah watched as the information was received, verified, and recognized as genuine by hundreds of different scientific teams. Consider this a demonstration of humanity's intentions, she continued. We're not interested in conquest or domination. We're interested in growth, in learning, in pushing the boundaries of what's possible. The armor chose us because we're the only species left that's still evolving rapidly enough to handle this level of transformation. The Crocian Hegemony Fleet Commander was the first to respond. This is General Korthak. You speak of peaceful intentions while demonstrating power that could destroy our entire civilization. General, Sarah replied gently, if I wanted to destroy your civilization, it would already be gone. What I've shown you is construction, creation, the birth of new possibilities. The fact that you interpret it as a threat says more about your mindset than mine. Dr. Vexithera's voice carried barely controlled excitement. Captain, the technologies you just transmitted, they're not just improvements, they're quantum leaps. The medical advances alone will revolutionize healthcare for every species in the galaxy. That's the point, Sarah explained. The predecessors didn't hoard their knowledge, they shared it freely with anyone ready to handle it responsibly. But they also understood that some technologies require wisdom as well as intelligence. The armor chose humanity not because we're the strongest or smartest, but because we're still capable of growing into whatever we need to become. One by one, the military fleets began powering down their weapons and requesting diplomatic channels, instead of maintaining attack formations. The demonstration had achieved what Sarah had hoped. It showed the galaxy that humanity had transcended the need for conventional warfare while simultaneously demonstrating the benefits of cooperation over conflict. Dr. Zelthrax, Sarah said, her multiple consciousnesses beginning to merge back into a single form, I believe it's time to establish the first Galactic Institute for Predecessor Studies. Humanity will share what we learn from the armor, but the research will be conducted cooperatively, with representatives from every species that's interested in growing, rather than simply acquiring power. The Corvani scientist's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Captain, such an institute would revolutionize our understanding of the universe itself. The technologies you've demonstrated today suggest possibilities we never even conceived of. That's exactly the point, Sarah replied, feeling the armor settling into a new equilibrium as her consciousness adapted to its full capabilities. The predecessors left this armor not as a weapon, but as a gift to whoever was ready to take the next step in galactic evolution. Humanity happened to be the species that was still young enough and foolish enough to believe that anything was possible. As the orbital cities she had created began receiving their first inhabitants, volunteers from dozens of species who wanted to study and live alongside humanity's newest capabilities, Sarah realized that the galaxy had just entered a new age. The age of scarcity and competition was ending. replaced by an era of cooperation and unlimited growth. The armor had found its worthy bearer not in the strongest or wisest species, but in the one that still believed in the infinite possibility of becoming something greater than what they were. And as humanity began to share the gifts of the predecessors with the galaxy, it became clear that sometimes the greatest strength was not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to build something better. The galaxy had lost its collective mind when a human put on the armor, but in that madness, they had discovered something far more valuable than any weapon: the knowledge that evolution never truly ended, and that the greatest adventures were still waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to keep growing.